Tim, how is Actonomy approaching autonomy on farms?
Well, first of all, Grayson, it's great to be here with you. And our approach to autonomy on farms is a bit different. So, one of the most important things that we're doing differently is we're not building robots, we're not building tractors, we're not building implements. We're working with equipment manufacturers that have been doing this for sometimes over a century and know how to build equipment that withstands the harsh environment. And we're developing the software to help their equipment become a lot smarter. So instead of, raising lots and lots of capital to build hardware, we're accelerating the digital transformation of the existing equipment manufacturers.
Are you building any of the actuators or any of the components that have to go on these trucks as you retrofit them?
Some of them, yes. And in some cases, we do the sensor suite and the software stack kind of together as an automation kit. But if the manufacturer has other suppliers that they wish to use for certain cameras and whatnot, as long as they meet certain specs, we go ahead and accommodate that. But we have been known to build the proof of concept vehicles to develop our software on, and then we work with integration into existing equipment with different manufacturers. And it's not just tractors, it's also implements, which are the tools you put on tractors to get certain jobs done.
I'll say point blank, it's very smart. In an adjacent industry, Wave is taking a very similar approach to you, where they're using the cameras that are on there and putting their own software on the vehicles of the camera. If that vehicle has a radar, they use that as well. It's very cost effective. It's highly scalable, and at scale, it's highly profitable. That aside, why did you decide to embark on this path?
Great question. First of all, you need to know a little bit something about my background. So I was born and raised a farmer. And I started my own farming operation at the age of 16. So I started a vineyard operation and a winery when I was in high school. And for some reason, Grayson, I became very popular in high school. But anyway, that's another story. I had this farming operation. I was born a farmer. I know farmers. I know farming. And through the years, when I accidentally got into technology through my undergrad and then I went on to grad school in computer science, I kept my farming operation going while I was in Silicon Valley for decades. And so the name of my farming operation, by the way, is Trattori Farms. Trattori means tractor in Italian, because I would build tractors as a young kid. I would repair tractors. There is nobody in the world who would want to build a tractor company more than yours truly. However, the farmer in me says, wait a minute, that would be ridiculous, because when you're a farmer, you have trusted brands. And the reason why you have trusted brands is because of the dealer network, the parts, the service. If I look around my Thanksgiving table, I kid you not, some of the folks around my Thanksgiving table are tractor dealers because they become so integral to your livelihood, right? It's not like a car where, hey, I can hire a taxi or an Uber or Lyft or have a friend drive me, or I can take public transportation. Oh my goodness. Whereas in these industrial markets like agriculture and others, the equipment is so important to your livelihood that infrastructure, those dealer networks and those companies that know how to build this equipment is so much more important than in other parts of our consumer lives.
It's very important. I want to highlight, you have a tractor museum. I got to put my tractor hat on. Do you have one of the Lamborghini tractors?
Well, I have some Lamborghini implements. I don't have a full tractor, but I do have two Porsche tractors. And a lot of people don't know that Porsche made tractors from 1956 or 1962. I have a winery and a tasting room, and yes, it serves as a little tractor museum as well, where I showcase some of my favorite tractors that I've restored through the years. And can I tell you my favorite tractor though? And people don't know this. So there's a very unique tractor that is no longer made anymore, but my last name is Bucher. And it's a Bucher tractor that comes from the country of Switzerland, which is where my family immigrated from. So at the center of my tasting room, I have a Bucher tractor, which is probably the only one known to be in the United States. And it's on all of my farming operations, merchandise, and even it's on my wine labels, my olive oil labels, because I do olive oil as well. So it's kind of a fun fact.
A fun fact is that when you deploy autonomy, either in a winery, in an olive field, just in a farm in general, in the vineyard, you increase productivity. What type of productivity increases are your customers seeing when they deploy your technology in their fields?
Well, first of all, you need to achieve performance or productivity that's on par with human productivity. the reason why you're seeing more and more autonomy being brought into industrial markets is because we're all being challenged with labor issues. Now, agriculture has some additional issues that's compounding that. So it's not just about being more productive, it's also about closing the labor gap that exists. In the early days of autonomy in agriculture, the autonomous vehicle with their implements weren't necessarily doing as well as a single human could do. But just recently, we've essentially become par with the human. And now we're going beyond that because of what we call multi-vehicle operation. So if you can have one person, with a mobile phone or with a tablet controlling one vehicle, that's great. It makes it safer and whatnot. But it's when you have one person overseeing an entire fleet of autonomous vehicles and implements that your productivity really increases. And that's something that Agtonomy focused on from day one, is not just, working with equipment manufacturers, but making the experience and the service that backs it, that actually operates it, be able to scale to multiple vehicles. And that's when the ROI for the growers really just, falls out quite easily.
Do you view that as central command, or let's call it the software platform for farms, where if you have Gus, it's a giant ugly sprayer, that big autonomous thing going around, you have some of your technology where a farmer or farmers could have a central operation to manage all their operations in the field?
I do actually, and the analog I use is the smart home. Do you remember not that long ago, only a few of us that could hack certain things could have like an automatic door lock or some such thing. And now we have thermostats and video feeds on your front door and your rear door and all kinds of stuff. And we now kind of have these sort of central commands and even certain kits from different developers that you can hook multiple equipment together. So I think, the evolution in the farm is very similar. You're starting off, very simply right now, but you are going to see a lot more of a command center for the smart farm of the future that involves incorporation of not just autonomous vehicles, but other kinds of data collection and then data analytics services that can help the equipment become smarter. I call it the closed loop system, right? Where you're informing the autonomous equipment when and what to do based upon the analytics of the data that you're gathering, from simple things like weather to more elaborate things like, the crop health or the growing stage or the other aspects of the soil.
Now, I have to go down Geek Out Road with you because you opened the door.
Let's go.
Let's go. If you know this from a winery experience, you have certain windows of when you pick the grapes to ferment them. Can all that data eventually go into, let's just call it the smart farm powered by Agtonomy? And because sometimes, this from generation to generation, winemaker, father to son, in some cases, that institutional knowledge is passed down. Could that eventually become digitized, where you have all these, say, 50 years of growing seasons where this is the ideal time based on the weather conditions, the frost and the weather and everything?
Absolutely. I mean, that's something that we envision at Autonomy helping to enable. Now, I want to be clear, though, that I don't believe Autonomy should do all parts of that. Similar to the partnering strategy on the equipment side, we're also partnering with companies that are agronomist experts in different crops. Now, Agtonomy, we focus on permanent crops because there's a lot of automation in row crops. Row crops are the corn and the soybean and the wheat and things of that nature. Whereas the permanent crops are your fruit and nut trees, your vines, your caneberries. They're much higher value crop. And they actually require more precision in the technology because you're dealing with plants that are very valuable. Like if you and I took out, I don't know how many, some number of corn stalks, it's kind of a bummer, but it's not the end of the world. But if we take out, one orange tree or one olive tree, it's, like $4,000. So you need to have that different level of precision. And when it comes to the analytics for the different crops, again, I don't believe one company can be the agronomy expert in all of those crops. So partnering with companies that know how to do analytics for grapes, know how to do analytics for apples, which is a really big field, by the way. There's so much data in apples, more than I had ever known before. And then translating their output into the actions is critical. And I think that's something that could be the umbrella over the smart farm, is that command and control and almost that self-sufficient farming operation. By the way, it's funny you say, usually farms are passed down through generations. You're right. I'm a fifth generation farmer and I have three children, and none of them are going into farming. So the buck stops with me. And that's happening, everywhere around the world, whether you're in the United States, India, Asia, you name it, or Europe rather. So I think the need for automation, the need for technology has never been greater because of this shortage we have of people who know how to farm or who even want to farm.
I have long conversations with deer. You have older individuals that own farms and their children don't want it, their grandkids don't want it, but they still want to farm. But because of their health, their age, they're turning to automation so they can keep the family farm. What is causing this disinterest with younger generations of not being farmers? Is it too much labor? Is it not sexy? Is it not appealing? What do you think is causing this trend? Because you're right, it is a global trend.
It's a global trend, and I think it involves opportunity. What do I mean by that? There are so many opportunities now for folks to be an influencer or play video games professionally or whatever. I'm using that as an extreme, okay? But it is there, and I think that the younger generation today, they see their parents having worked so hard that they have other opportunities, and I think they're migrating towards that. The challenge globally, though, and it's actually an existential problem, is that last time I checked, you and I still need to eat, right? And and so that's why when you think about autonomy and you think about technology in industrial markets like agriculture, there's never been a more important time to make sure we can bring that in so that we have a future as a global society, to be quite blunt.
I call it yummy tummies. Farmers around the world make us have yummy tummies with automation, autonomy, robots coming to farms. And you go through TikTok or X, there's a general excitement about Optimus. Well, you can get some version of Optimus on a farm today. Does that start to spark some interest from these younger generations? Say, wait a second, I could play with robots all day. This is cool. Does that maybe reverse the trend?
It does. And we have customers that we've been working with in our pilots. So we've been doing pilots for the last couple of years, and we're expanding that in 2025. And maybe we can talk about that later. But one of our customers, very large public company out of Australia, they have they had a lot of openings for skilled operators to drive tractors, and they couldn't fill it. And so we started working with them, and they started to see how their existing labor could be upskilled, but they still needed even more people to manage fleets of, autonomous farming equipment that was autonomy enabled. And so, they put ads out for folks who didn't necessarily have any tractor driving experience, but they said, video game experience a preference. And they got a ton of applicants, and they called it an ag tech operator. And so you're seeing that being very attractive. And my hope is that by bringing technology in, we do exactly what you're saying, which is to attract a new generation because they get to play with robots and they can basically, manage these fleets, not from the dust and dirt of 120-degree temperature farms, but in their air conditioned truck or in the office or in their home or wherever it might be. And I think that's giving me hope as well, is the combination of technology will help solve the challenges we have of farming and will attract another generation of new kinds of farmers. And to me, there's nothing more exciting than that when you can think of one of the most important industries in the world kind of being taken to new heights or being transformed digitally. It's pretty cool.
Let's take this one step further. There's the growth of augmented reality. You have Meta Glass, which are on the Ray Bans, and you have the Oculus, which I'm really amazed at how Meta just continues to sell the Meta Quest at pretty large numbers. Does that become a situation where I can go into the metaverse, but you're actually doing farming? Does that potentially become another catalyst in the right direction?
Yeah, we joke a lot at Autonomy about it's Farmville for real. Because, I do think that can be a reality. I mean, if you just look at the Autonomy suite of mobile applications today, it's kind of surreal because you get to, set up where you want to do a job. So click, click, click. You get to say what kind of a job you want to do. I want to mow or I want to spray. You get to say, who is going to oversee it. So it could be, Grayson. And then you say, okay, these are the 20 vehicles you have. Now on your app, you get to see all 20 vehicles doing their tasks. And you even get live video feeds from each one, if you will. So it's a real Farmville that's, happening in front of you on your mobile app. And of course, it could be on the Oculus or the Meta glasses. I have a pair of those Ray-Bans, by the way. Once they get augmented reality, I think it'll be really cool. But having the AI built in for voice recognition is good. But I think those are the kind of scenarios you're going to be dealing with. And again, you're dealing with very large operations. Some of our growers that we work with in California and in Washington and other states, they don't have like 50 acres. They have like thousands of acres, like over 5,000 acres. So managing a fleet of virtual but real tractors and implements starts to become rather interesting when you look at the user experience.
When your customers deploy Autonomy and various forms of automation, what kind of productivity increases are they seeing?
Well, when multi-vehicle comes into play, it's literally, you know, a multiple of a single human. So if a single human can manage 5 vehicles, you're now getting 5 skilled operators for the price of one, right? So I don't think you'll ever not have a person oversee the fleet. Somebody's got to be in control of the command center, right? Let's say it's the command center that does everything, data collection, farming vehicles, transport trucks, cars, whatever it might be. There still needs to be, someone who's kind of, overseeing that at least for the next probably decade or so. And so I think that when you have the multi-vehicle today, our customers are seeing literally several 100% increase in productivity. And that's a big deal. And one of the things that I should also note is that we don't believe that farmers will buy new technology. We believe you need to try before you buy. So the way we operate currently is it's a pure rental proposition. You don't actually buy Agtonomy-enabled tractors. You essentially rent Agtonomy-enabled equipment on a monthly basis. And if it doesn't work, we have a guarantee. And I think that's really important because you have to really show growers that it really does work before they start to invest, millions and millions of dollars, and eventually billions and eventually trillions, into this new way of farming. I think that's a big part of the equation as well.
Could a grower rent it for a season or rent it for a harvest as they try technology? Because I look at it from a balance sheet perspective. Some of this equipment, you and I both know, is in the hundreds of thousands, and in some cases, get into the millions. If that farmer can, based on their budget, say, okay, I need it for 3 months for the harvest or time period, they pay you that fee, that could potentially have a long-term potential savings for them. Are you seeing any of that going on?
We are, and it's the only way we operate, and it's the way we've been operating for the last couple of years, which is you rent it for the season, and we have 2 approaches. You can rent it annually, or you can rent it just for the season. And by the way, you mentioned harvest, and harvest is important, don't get me wrong. But in a lot of permanent crops, in most permanent crops, the majority of the labor and the expenses are pre-harvest and post-harvest, because harvest tends to be a very short window. Apples is a perfect example. There's so much work that you do in spraying, especially on apples, and it's like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, right? When you're done with one pass, you just start again. So you're continually spraying to ensure the apples are healthy and that they color up and that the right amount of apples are in each tree. And so the harvest time is actually a much shorter window and therefore expense than the work you do before and after, and many other crops as well.
Look at apples. They're a little stronger than grapes, which are very delicate. How is it when the fruit's not being bruised? Is it what was written into these algorithms so it does not bruise the fruit?
Well, so to be clear, at Agtonomy, we don't focus on harvesting apples. There's very few companies that are able to do that. And I think it's going to take many more years for that to mature. I will do a shout out to our good friends at Advanced Farm. They have a great solution for harvesting. I think they're going to get there. So right now, apples are harvested 99% by humans, at least for the premium grade, right? So there's apples that you use for juice and other kinds of things, and those aren't necessarily the ones that need to be, beautiful colors and ripe and not bruised and things of that nature. And those tend to be harvested by hand. But again, for 6 months prior to harvest, you're spraying and you're mowing and you're doing weeding and you're doing other kinds of work in those orchards. And that's where, a bigger percentage of your expenses are.
Is that why? I'm going to ask him because Jorge's on your board from Blue River Technology See and Spray. Is that why Deere did a very nice exit for them because of the amount of spraying that's going on with their precision ag?
Great question. So Blue River, and yes, shout out to one of my board members, Jorge Herod, who's amazing. I call him the godfather of ag tech because he really was a pioneer. See and Spray, and what they did was use AI for detecting weeds in row crops. So if you look at the evolution of See and Spray, which then became See and Spray Ultimate and See and Spray Premium, and there's many different versions. And I was just at a show where they had one, and it was, I don't know, I think 150 feet wide, these big booms. And so they go over these row crops, and all these cameras and individual nozzles spray just the weeds and not the plant. And it's a huge efficiency from human labor weeding, as well as a savings in the ag inputs, i.e. the sprayed material that you're using. So that's different. That See and Spray is more for row crops. We focus on what's called air blast spraying, electrostatic spraying, or selective spraying in permanent crops. And when you have the technology on the tractor and you control a sprayer behind you, if you are missing a tree, why spray, right? You can shut off the valves on the right-hand side as you're going through, or you have a map that tells you where to spray more or less if you're doing some kind of, fungicide, and where the disease-prone areas are. You can layer it on more heavily in one area and not in another area. So everybody thinks spraying is, the same in agriculture. It's not. There's so many different kinds of spraying, and that's what makes it unique, is that you have to create a solution, not just a piece of technology. Or, for example, you can't just create an autonomous tractor because that does no good. Like you and I never go tractoring. We would go and, do something with the tractor, and that's where the implement comes on, and they need to work together as a solution.
When a farmer is looking to deploy an autonomy solution on a farm, what is the first thing that they have to do? Do they have to go mapping? What do they do?
So as a farmer, I knew that if you had to set up a bunch of infrastructure, it's game over, right? Okay, go and set up these base stations and set up this mesh network and everything. That's not going to work. So it's taken us a while, but we've been able to eliminate the need for any on-site infrastructure that's needed. So first of all, an autonomy-enabled tractor and implement arrives at the farm, nothing needs to be installed. And you might say, well, but what if you don't have internet? Well, every autonomy-enabled vehicle has not only cellular, which is not very good in agriculture, by the way, but it also has low Earth orbit satellite connectivity. So currently we're using and have had great success with Starlink technology, especially their Gen 3 units. And so they're actually embedded, and we look at not only cellular, do we have Starlink? Do we have a local Wi-Fi that we can even jump on as well? And we automatically, connect to the network, connect to the internet. And then we actually have technology that we've built. You asked at the very beginning, do we build any sensors? There is one unique thing that we do build that can give you localization, like where are you in the world? So the vehicle automatically, when it shows up, knows where it is in the world. Then you use the Agtonomy application, and you can use aerial imagery from everything from Google Maps to higher resolution drone maps, if you'd like. And from that imagery, you basically can say, this is the area that I want to farm. And that in permanent crops, there are rows, right? And you don't want to hit the trees. So we don't need super high resolution. We need to be kind of close till you get close to the row entry. And one of the things that we did that's very different is that we exploit the structure of the crop itself in order to farm the crop. Sounds very simple, but a lot of people have always used GPS and all this other stuff. Well, the GPS, when you're inside of a citrus grove or apple orchards or whatnot, you can't see the sky sometimes for a couple kilometers. And so you need to create a solution that can work in GPS denied environments, and it can work in internet denied environments. And that's what we did from the very beginning that has really helped us sort of slingshot forward in terms of leadership on, accuracy and precision in these different crops doing the work. So back to the question of, well, how does a farmer get started? They say, hey, I would like to, try this out. I'd like to rent a fleet of 3 or 4, 5, 6, whatever it is, one even. We always like to do demos on a farmer's site so that they get to see it in action in their operation. Super important as well in agriculture, as it is in many industrial applications. The vehicle knows where it's at. You basically see the aerial map. You say, I want to mow in these rows. We get close to the row, and then our perception stack takes over where we actually see the structure and do the farming operation. And when we're done, we go back to the shop or wherever the starting point was. We go back home. So it's very easy. And one of the things we like to do is we like to show the growers how easy it is as opposed to just telling them. That's always a big difference, is showing versus telling.
When does or where does computer vision enter the picture?
Always. So every autonomy enabled vehicle does require cameras. That's our main sensor type that we use for navigation, for safety and crop detection and things of that nature. We do have additional sensors for redundancy because safety is really, really important. So we do use LiDAR, which, as you know, as someone who knows a lot about technology, the cost of LiDARs has just been coming down like crazy. And I'm so excited, Grayson. I've been seeing some, solid state LiDARs. They operate incredibly well. 2025 is going to be the year of very low cost LiDAR. So we think it's important to kind of have that redundancy on top of the computer vision, especially for what we call occupancy detection. Like if you're just moving along on a road, transporting from the shop to the field and then back again, you want to make sure that you might not be able to categorize everything you see, although we do a lot of classification of objects. When there is an object that is new to you, you just want to know that there's an object there and you want to avoid it and do dynamical obstacle avoidance or stop if there is a more critical safety issue like, there's no way I can go through this. So yeah, computer vision is really key, and it gives you a lot of other benefits too, like, data collection. Remember those analytics I talked about? You can get a lot from imagery in terms of, crop health and, the number of fruit, like the number of apples you have, the number of blossoms early and where to spray more and less and whatnot. It's super helpful for that.
I'm curious now. If you go on a farm, it could be dusty, it could be muddy, you can have rocks, you have branches, you bump into things. How do you harden the sensors or protect them for that environment? Because that's the environment you're operating in, and sensors are used to being used in a studio like I'm in right now, not necessarily out in the wild where you are.
I think everyone underestimates just how harsh these industrial environments are, especially agriculture. These are nasty environments. And so the sensors must be able to withstand that kind of environment, which gets back to my whole point at the beginning about like, why would we say we could build equipment that lasts? You have to have like good equipment, first of all. Now you have to layer on sensors that can withstand this. But now you have to layer on sensors that can also deal with the different conditions, right? Now, I get a lot of questions. People always ask me, well, Tim, can you operate in downpour rains and in sleet and snow? And my answer is, you wouldn't farm in those conditions, right? You wouldn't be out there farming. So the answer is no, we cannot operate in those kind of conditions. But when you deal with fog and you deal with dust, you have to operate in those conditions. And so that's where sort of the redundancy of multiple sensors and, the old thing of sensor fusion really comes into play in these kind of applications, more so than in even passenger transportation. And what's really interesting in working with LiDAR companies, they're even able to detect, the reflections that come from hardened objects versus, the softer objects like, water particulates and fog or dust, things of that nature. So you're now getting to the point where you can layer computer vision, very sophisticated. By the way, I thought we were going to have all kinds of dust issues with camera lenses. I will tell you, I'm shocked about that. We haven't had any issues around that. Now we have an SOP, a standard operating procedure for when you should clean your cameras and whatnot. And it's usually about, every couple of weeks. But when you combine, these multiple sensors, you can now have very reliable and accurate autonomous operation in these farming conditions. And I'm super excited about that because it's only getting better on a very rapid pace too.
It's highly scalable, and it's a controlled environment for the most part. The farmer knows who's on his farm, who's going on his farm. He knows all the patterns. How large do you see this opportunity of autonomy on farms eventually becoming?
It is massive. I mean, first of all, if we just look at the number of like why is Agtonomy focused on permanent crops? The reason why we focused on permanent crops is there's multiple reasons. Some of which are, number one, you need more precise technology to operate, per my comments earlier. The crop is higher value. Number two, you actually need more labor there. Like you and I could farm, I don't know, 1,000 acres of corn, but you and I could probably only farm maybe 100 acres of, citrus or apples. It's a lot more labor intensive. And number three, there's a lot more equipment that's needed. So you have these additional pressures. Now, they're not the $1 million tractors, but they're still, to your point earlier, $100,000. So you have a lot more opportunity to help relieve the pain points that exist there. So if you were to look at the next 4 years, the number of tractors or power units, as some people refer to them, sold in both permanent crops or high value crops and in things like ground maintenance, which are your zero turn mowers and whatnot, just in permanent crops, it's about 15 million units over the next 4 years. And then you have another several million in ground maintenance. You're dealing with over 20 million units over the next 4 years. Okay, so if you can bring automation into that equipment and offer it as a SaaS model, meaning, okay, well, you can pay for it all up front, if you want, if that's what the market, demands, or maybe it's monthly or maybe it's annual, whatever it is. You have an additional opportunity there, because if you were to put skilled labor out there, if you can even hire that, you're dealing with $65,000 to $75,000, a person fully burdened. And if you're only charging maybe $1,000 for a growing season of maybe 7 months, you're talking about $7,000. So if you take those numbers and you kind of multiply them out and say, hey, I only want to have automated solutions in 0.5% of that market of over 20 million units. When you do the math, you're dealing with $1 billion in revenue, which makes you a multi-billion-dollar company value-wise. So that's just like one example of kind of the overall view that we have of the opportunity. And obviously, if you get 10% penetration, you're talking about $20 billion opportunity. But it's more important than the company that's providing that automation. It's about the output of the trillions of dollars in the food market that we desperately need as a global society. So we don't look at it as sort of just the business opportunity. We also look at it as the mission to help the world, right? To help feed the world. And I think you'll find that in a lot of companies that are doing ag tech. It's not just about doing something cool. It's not just about trying to make money. It's really mission based, and that's something that I'm definitely passionate about, and I want to help the global society, if you will, at this juncture in my career.
But you're right. You said a lot of very important things. One, it's a global issue, and two, and there's some UN interest. There's a UN data on this, and there's some IMF data on this, that we could have a global food shortage. And I'm not hyperboiling it for our listeners and viewers. It's real. There's data there that backs us up. If individuals, as you discussed, do not want to farm, that's what we have to have automation on farms, point blank. I like your approach of no infrastructure, no sale, lease only, because a farmer can build it into their budgets. Do you see that becoming a global trend as we're staring down the barrel of a food shortage?
I think it should be meeting the growers where they're at. If the growers, especially in this early stage, need to try before they buy, rental model it is. There may come a time, and I believe there will be a time in certain regions and certain grower types who actually do want to own it. That's fine. I see all models being possible because every grower has a different situation. And even like you said, like we've learned that certain large growers have different budgeting things, right? So they have to lock in their budgets at the end of the year for the following year. But when you say rental, they actually can add that at any point in time. They don't have to account for that in their CapEx budget. So I think I think no matter what, we have to meet the growers where they are, whether it's culturally, they want to buy things or they want to rent things. From a budget standpoint, they'd rather, lease than own. Totally fine. I'm not saying there's going to be one business model that works. I'm saying it's going to be the business model that works for the growers that's going to work for the grower in that region and for that crop too, because we're seeing a lot of differences in different crops too.
It's getting interesting. So your startup, resources limited, you're not a Fortune 500 publicly traded food company. How do you tackle this market since the opportunity is so immense, but as a startup, you're forced to be disciplined.
Yes. Focus is very key. But for us, we try to get a bigger bang for the buck by partnering with companies who are experts in equipment manufacturing, who are experts in agronomy and data analytics for crop A, B, or C. So that strategy, I will be honest with you, Grayson, it takes longer to get to commercialization with a partnering strategy. But when you hit commercialization, the impact is much greater than you could ever do on your own. I will be honest with you. I get upset when I'm at conferences these days and my colleagues in competitor companies, and we like to call them friends, right? We all try to help each other. But I hate it when, they stand on stage and say, we have 100 robots in operation. We have 400 robots in operation. We have, 10, 20. It's so small, it doesn't make any impact whatsoever. And so you have to get to the numbers of the companies that and growers know so well, which are the green tractor companies and the orange tractor companies and the blue tractor companies. Colors mean a lot in agriculture, by the way. For those of your viewers who don't know, when you say green, everybody knows that's John Deere. And when you say orange, everybody knows that's Kubota. When you say blue, everybody knows that's New Holland, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I think it's a partnering strategy that's enabling us to do more with less. And when we hit commercialization, make it more impactful than we could ever do on our own.
It might take longer, but in the long term, it can allow you to scale. If you wanted to compete with one of the big colors, you've got to raise billions of dollars and hire machinists, experts, then going through all the safety testing. And then you hit the nail on the head earlier, trust. Why are they going to trust your custom tractor versus one of the big colors? Well, I've had the big color. My grandfather had it. And going down the line, was partnership on day one, was that always a strategy, or was this something that you learned as you started to build the business in the early days?
When you have farmer DNA in you like I do, and you have tech DNA in you like I do, you're in a very unique position to understand both worlds. And so technology-wise, I knew I could do certain things, but farmer-wise, I knew it would be foolish to do those things. And so a farmer knows that by the way, it's not just, hiring mechanical engineers and building factories and everything. It's also about the dealer network. The distribution is just as important as the vehicles and the equipment itself in this industry, as it is in other industrial markets like, land maintenance or construction or warehouse logistics, et cetera, et cetera. So it was that DNA that I have in me since I was born that made me realize the only way to do this is to work with those trusted brands and help accelerate their transformation into this new digital world that many other industries, as you know, have transitioned to, and your viewers know too, right? You look at the automotive industry, you look at the trucking industry, right? Where one of our board members, Sterling Anderson, he's the co-founder and chief product officer of Aurora, and he did the original Tesla autopilot. He's an amazing pioneer of on-road autonomy, and it's different in industrial applications, and I think he sees that opportunity as he's moved into trucking, and he sees the other technology advances and how that can be applied to so many other industries. But it is an interesting, different business model, and it's one that I really believe in because of the farmer in me. And I think other farmers really believe in that too, because they do have their trusted brands that sit with them at Thanksgiving table, as I do. Again, some of my really close friends are tractor dealers.
If you look at Sterling, an extremely smart gentleman, but now he's with Aurora. They're taking a partnership approach with PACCAR and Volvo Autonomous Solutions. Aurora's not building the truck, and they partner with Continental to make it automotive grade. They're basically, if you talk to Chris or Sterling, they'll tell you, we're a software company. We're building the Aurora driver, and it's very similar to what you're building. So there's a clearly defined path on the Aurora side that, yes, Volvo and PACCAR are embracing this. On the ag side, Deere is very public embracing autonomy, Holland to some degree. When you come with this autonomy partnership approach, are they open to it? Are they receptive to it? Do they see the future like as they're seeing on the truck side with Sterling?
If they don't see the future, they're not going to be around for very long. Most of them see the future. And here's why. When they see the number of operators that can operate their equipment going down, that means the number of units they can sell goes down correspondingly. So the only future is to create automated solutions, and if they are really, really smart, to look at service models that can augment their equipment sales. If you look at John Deere's public announcements, they want to have 10% of their revenue coming from services. And that can be autonomous services. It can be, data analytics services. It can be all kinds of services. When they say services, it's not the service of tractors and parts and whatnot. That's another part of their business and their dealer networks business more so. But these are digital services. And I think that's the future for all of these industrial players. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, says it well. He's like, you need to take, folks who know how to build great iron, and they have iron factories, and you need to couple that with AI factories. And he's very, very, I think he's dead on with that. And he's even said that to some of our partners because I've introduced them to him. So it's a great, exciting time right now. And folks like Sterling and Chris, they see it in the trucking business. You're seeing it in all kinds of other businesses. So I can't tell you how excited I am and passionate I am about being in the space.
You have to have the passion. Jensen had the passion when nobody believed him when him and his co-founders invented the GPU, and lo and behold, today without the GPU and NVIDIA, we wouldn't have crypto, we wouldn't have autonomy, for that matter of fact. And the common denominator is Wall Street loves NVIDIA, Wall Street loves autonomy, but Wall Street likes autonomy without all the hardware that goes along with it. And autonomy is going to, as you know, we talked about trucks, and ag is going to go into multiple different verticals across the globe. As you scale Autonomy, what new verticals are you looking into? Because there was an interesting article in Ag Drive that you were kind of hinting at that there might be some new verticals coming.
Well, I will tell you this. We actually, when I was years ago when we did our first autonomous mission, and guess what our first autonomous mission was? It was to mow an open field and do it very precisely within the boundaries that we had set. So if you think about agriculture, it's going more and more what's called no-till. And for your listeners, no-till is where you don't basically disrupt the soil with discs or with other kinds of plows and whatnot. And one of the reasons is we've discovered just recently, I would call it over the last couple of decades, that soil health is really, really important. And carbon sequestration is also important. And if you till the soil, you kind of release that back in with all the great carbon that plants have captured during that growing season. So mowing is really important. And I would argue that we do essentially land maintenance when we're mowing between a row. It's just that we're doing dynamic obstacle avoidance every, nanosecond, as opposed to maybe every 10 minutes on a golf course. So being able to do land maintenance really well is important. And guess what? It's an adjacent market that is very similar, has a lot of analogs. As a matter of fact, we say if you can do permanent crops really well, you can do ground maintenance, land maintenance kind of applications better than anyone who has focused on their company exclusively on that. So I think that's an incredible opportunity. And you also look at the companies that we work with, whether it's, Bobcat, or if you look at other equipment companies, they don't just have ag equipment, they have construction equipment, they have land maintenance equipment, they have warehouse logistics equipment, forklifts and whatnot. And so the partnering approach takes longer to get to commercialization, but you also have the opportunity to go into adjacent segments with partners or with different partners much more easily. There's even been other areas that we've been asked to apply our autonomous solution and our automation software to that I never expected. We're very good at transporting material, like fruit crops. A lot of people think when you pick an apple, let's say that a robot picked an apple, but the apple you're not done with the job. You have to haul it to where the semi trucks are. And that might be a mile away. And then the semi trucks haul it to the production facility. Or you might have to haul it from the field to the production facility, which still may be, kilometers away. Like on my farm, the farthest part's about a kilometer away from where my wine cellar is or where my olive mills are. And so transporting that crop is something that we become very good at. Well, there's a lot of other applications for that. Construction, there's a lot of transporting of material from one area to another when you're building a new solar field or a new building or a new apartment complex or whatever it might be. So there's lots of other kinds of uses that we're getting requested to go into. And I think that makes it very exciting as well. But getting back to your point about startups, you don't have infinite resources. And so it's important to focus. And that's why we take it step by step and industry by industry.
You look at it, Autonomy has a bright future. There's multiple verticals, as you alluded to, on offer autonomy that you can expand to. Perhaps you can eventually power the whole autonomy farm of the future, or you can move into quarry, you can move into mining. You have a lot of opportunities because, as you said, your partnerships overlap in all those various industries. Tim, in your opinion, what does the future of automation on farms look like?
Well, first of all, from my discussion, I want to emphasize to your listeners that it's going to happen. You are going to have smart farms. And that smart farm has to be a closed loop system. So we talked a lot about data analytics. The whole notion of, having the ability to have equipment operate on its own to do the tasks that you need to do on a farm, if you can have it informed essentially automatically by other equipment or the same equipment that's collecting data and then doing analytics on that to then set up your what we call work orders. So there's work orders are like spray my entire ranch, but then a job is, spray this block of my ranch, and then a task might be send these 20 tractors out to that block to spray, and split that automatically. And so, the software will be able to do all of this for the farmer and ultimately satisfy the shortages that we currently have in labor to hopefully combat the food security issues that we have going in the future. So I believe, and I want your listeners to hear this, I believe there's more opportunity in industrial markets than in things like passenger transportation. You hear of, oh, if Tesla gets their robotaxi working, it's an extra $1 trillion to their market cap. Yeah, I think it's multi-trillion dollars to, the area of food and the value that it brings there. So for any of your listeners who, like to do things that can, get to market faster than a lot of the on-road regulations require, they should look at industrial markets and expressing their talents there, because it does have a lot of impact. And I always say that, these like passenger transportation, you and I want a fully autonomous car that we could sit in the back seat on. Sure, that's a service of convenience. But in agriculture and other industrial markets, to be able to have automation and autonomy, it's not a service of convenience. It's a service of necessity. And that's what we're striving for at Agtonomy, is to make that a reality.
Industrial off-road autonomy is a growing market. Autonomy has the ability to scale into multiple verticals, and they have a very bright future. The future is bright, the future is autonomous, the future is autonomy. Tim, thank you so much for coming on the road to autonomy today.
Thank you, Grayson. Great to be here.